Welcome to today's Criterion Learning Series. We'll be covering Affordable Care Act reporting, and there's a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump right in as soon as possible here. I do want to mention this disclaimer here about this. So if you do have any questions about things like the taxability of incomes and deductions, or is a plan ACA compliant or something like that, of course, we cannot provide that type of advice. We ask that you please consult your accountants, your tax advisors, your benefit brokers, other consultants. What we can help you do is the setup of those things in our system and how it would work in there. And we're going to cover some of those things today. But if you do have questions, of course, as you can see there, you can always reach out to us, help@criterionhcm.com. All right, I do want to mention these filing deadlines here, and I do want to first off mention, I believe everything here is correct. If there's any typos, please check with the IRS, your tax advisors, et cetera. But I did research these, and this is what I found from the IRS. So the furnishing of 1095-Cs to individuals needs to be done by the 3rd of March. Paper copies of ACA forms are due to the IRS if you're going to file them by paper on February 28th, which is obviously tomorrow. They need to be postmarked. If you're going to do it electronically, which I would encourage because it gives you more time, they are due at the end of March on the 31st. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right into system here. So obviously, we're going to be covering Affordable Care Act reporting, and as usual, a lot of this stuff is set up in the background in the settings. There will be viewing the ACA forms here in self-service. I'll get to that at the end. So we're just going to jump right on over to the settings on HR for this. Of course, you could go to payroll and do these things because a lot of this is actually just in the admin configuration and settings over there. So if you only have access to payroll in the drop down and you have access to your settings, you can also go about it that way. While this is loading up my HR admin, I do want to mention we do have a chat and a Q&A. So if you do have something that comes up as a question, you're certainly welcome to ask us during the webinar. We'll try to answer. If not, again, you can always reach out to us, help@criterionhcm.com. And I don't know why my system is a little bit slow right now, so I do apologize for that. So what we're going to do is look at some of the configurations around benefits and setting things up like that. Of course, talking about employee data and things like that. So I'm not terribly worried about the dashboards at this moment. So what we're going to do is under HR admin, we're going to look at some of the settings in here that could affect your configuration for benefits and how things might be showing up when we get to ACA. I'm not going to jump right to that. So first thing would be on any of the benefit plans that are ACA, what you want to do is make sure that this checkbox right here is checked so that we know, was somebody enrolled or not into an ACA plan. So one or more of your medical plans needs to have this option checked here. If you are self-insured, then of course this would need to be checked. That way we can generate the forms for your dependents and so forth. So that's what would need to be checked here on those self-insured plans. All right, everything else really it doesn't matter as far as the settings, for example, the name of the plan and all those other things. That's not really going to impact what we're doing here in the benefits. If you do have questions on your benefit configuration, perhaps it's been a little while since you've looked into here, you can always click the Help Center and get help on this. And of course, you can always reach out to support if you have questions as well. But this will give you a great explanation of what all the different fields mean on here. And you'll see here as I go down, it does talk about that ACA checkbox. So include the plan and ACA reporting. All right, so make sure that is checked. If it's not checked today, but you haven't done anything as far as your reporting, you're safe to go in and check this and it'll still work for, even though the enrollment was for last year. All right, you do want to check, of course, that it is for the plan for 2024. Perhaps you have new plans for 25 and you don't see the old plans here. Make sure you check off the show inactive ones because maybe you made it inactive and it's not showing there. So you can always hit that toggle there to show that. Of course, information that's going to show on the ACA form does come from the employee record. So just point out some of that information that you'll want to make sure is correct, or if it needs to be fixed because you generated the forms and there's incorrect information. Things like the demographics, of course, their name, as you can see here, first and last name. Also, social security number, make sure that is correct. If somebody gets the form and they say, hey, my social is wrong, it should be 4-3 in the middle instead of 3-4, you can fix that here and, of course, regenerate if you need to. You can fix this stuff in the ACA settings itself. This is obviously more permanent. If I do it on the form, it's just on the form itself, and it's still going to be wrong next year when I go to generate again. So make sure you fix that right there. Same idea with the address. So, this is the person's address where the forms will be mailed to, or it's just going to print on there. So you'll want to make sure this information is correct. Again, you could correct it for the form itself, but that doesn't feed back into here if you just correct the form. All right, you will want to possibly double check things like the hire date, because this will impact how it shows up on the ACA form. If this date is wrong, it might show that they were not eligible for plans, or they were eligible before they truly were eligible based on this hire date. So maybe numbers got transposed, or there was an adjustment after the person was hired or something. So you will want to double check that this information is right here. So double check that. And this is the crucial one. Obviously, these other fields might impact other things. I won't go into those right now. Benefits. So again, you'll want to see, did they have benefits? Now, you may have to hit the show inactive just to show plans from the previous year, because if you've had your enrollment since, since the end of the year, it's going to hide those older records because that's by default. So you will want to toggle this to show the current records. And then, of course, go to the record for 2024 to make sure that it's right. Checking things like the expiration date and the effective date, because again, it's possible if you had the wrong date in the employment that it did get passed through to the benefit, and maybe this is off by a month or something. So you can come in here and you can manually override this if you needed to. This is, again, something you could fix on the form, but it does not come back into the plan if you do make that correction. All right, so that is some of the settings that you would need to change on the employees. Let me show you how you would actually generate these forms if you've not done it in the past. It does happen under HR administration, so hopefully you're a user that has access to HR administration, and you should see ACA here. If you don't, that's a security configuration. You may need to reach out to whoever's in charge of the security setup for your system. Perhaps it was overlooked that you needed ACA, and you're going to process that. So that would be in the security profiles to get access to ACA. Right, now I've already generated mine for last year, but if you have not, you simply click this button that says generate, and it will create the record that will look like this. And then it will be populated like this. Takes a few seconds to do this, so I'd already have pre-populated this. Now you'll see here the contact first and last name, the title, and phone number. So you will want to fill this stuff out here. So I'll just go ahead and do that real quick. All right, and then you'll notice here we've got the employee counts per month. Now my particular plan, everybody was eligible for the full year, so I've got everything in here for each month. And you'll see the MEC offer. If you need to check that box, you can do that right there. And then if you're an aggregated group, so perhaps you have multiple EINs, you'll want to check this box off there, and your transition relief code could go there. Employers, if you're one of these aggregated, you would have to list the employers down here that are the other EINs. And what you would do is simply click the add button, type in the employer name, and put in their EIN. And of course, you can add as many as you need to. Perhaps you've got 5 or 10 of them. Just hit add, and update those into there. All right, of course, if you do make a change, it's not liking my phone number here. Okay, I don't really care if it's right or not. You want to hit save to make sure that those things are changed, and then you can go back in and you'll see that information in there. Now, I'm not going to publish it or download yet because I want to show you one of the best ways to look at this data is in a spreadsheet. Now, I can do the download. That would actually generate a zip file. In fact, I'll click it. What it does is this does take a little bit of time to download because it's generating the forms for all your employees. And if you've got hundreds of employees, it could take a while. But if you want to look at the data and perhaps edit information, that's where this import button is really great, because you'll see right here, I have the option to download. So this is going to take all of your data and it's going to be in a spreadsheet. And I'll share that spreadsheet, my version of the spreadsheet for my company here. It's going to be in Excel. So the default name is ACA. If you've downloaded it multiple times, you may see ACA1, ACA2, etc. Just make sure you're looking at the latest copy. And it does download to wherever your downloads are. I can't tell you where that is because that's your individual setting on your computer, but your browsers typically have a download window and you can find it that way. But as I mentioned, it is called ACA, by default, so you can always search for it if you can't find it, where you might expect your downloads to be. So you'll see there's multiple tabs. I'm going to start here just to talk about this. This is that information that I just filled in on my my other screen there. So my name, my job title, but you'll notice here the EIN, the company name, the address, and so forth. That's pulling from your employer setup and your work locations. So if you happen to notice a problem with that, you'll want to fix that in your employer setup and or work location so that it's correct going forward. Again, I could change it here if I want to, but this is just a one-time fix. It will not go back to the employer. Here are those employer numbers for the months, as well as those different checkboxes you saw there. So you could update it here if you'd like. I think it's pretty easy to do it through the system, but if you wanted to change the numbers here, you can do that. The ALE members, again, I could have just clicked add, typed in the names and EIN, but perhaps if you have a lot of them, it might be easier to do it on the spreadsheet. Again, you just type in the name and put in the EIN for each member. And then we have the employees. So this is going to be all the employees that we're going to generate a form for. You'll notice the first few columns is their demographics as well as their address. So this is where I was saying you'd want to fix that on the employee record because that's what feeds into this spreadsheet. Now I can, of course, come in here, change some information if I need to, fix a social or whatever, but this is a one-time fix for this particular form and it won't go back to the employee record. So that's really for columns B through G. Don't need to worry about this ID. That's just a ID that we generate when we create the forms. So you don't even need to worry about that. Here you'll see the start date of your plan. In my situation is January. So I see 01 there. Perhaps yours is different. So you might have a different number there that generates. And of course, you can change it if I needed to say started in March or something, it would say 03. Right. And then if you are self-insured, this would reflect that. And that again is a setting on the plan. Remember that. So here's the the offer of coverage for the year. And of course, this is dependent on the information that's over here for each month. So when I look at this, you'll notice some people have a blank, and that's because they were not an employee for the full year, or they weren't eligible for benefits for the full year. So they'll have a blank here. And then of course, we've got the monthly information over here. The ones that do have something here, that means every month in the year, they were the same. So Manuel here, he was 1E for the entire year. And you'll notice that over here in the months. All right, if you do have somebody, perhaps they were hired mid-year or they terminated or something like that, you'll be able to see that here with the codes that reflect their situation. So in this situation for Norma, she was not an employee for January and February, so those are blank. And you'll see the same type of thing down here for somebody who maybe was hired a little bit later. And if I do have somebody who termed, like this person, their December is blank because they were terminated. They weren't an employee at all in December. So that's what that is reflecting right there. If you don't agree with this information, again, it's reading from those dates on the employment screen. So maybe the hire date was wrong or the termination date in somebody who was terminated. Let me continue to scroll over here. All right, now this is if you have those plans that have the minimal essential coverage, or excuse me, the plans where you need to put in the employer share of the cost here, that's what is here. Now my plans are the IRS minimum based off of the poverty line, so they show a 0 here. But if you have plans that are different, you might see numbers in here. Again, it depends on the costs of your plans. So if they meet that coverage level, you might see numbers in here for the different employees whose plans are different. Right, and then let me go over here. These are the codes for the safe harbor. This is again kind of showing why they were eligible or not eligible over here based off of the employee's situation. I can never remember all these codes. It's very useful to go to the IRS website and remember what is, the A and D and H and so forth codes here. It has to do with, were they an employee? Were they in that transition period? Maybe they were hired and you got to wait 30 days before you're eligible and so forth. So that's why you might see 2A. That, I believe, if I'm correct, means they're not an employee. And then 2D is that time frame when they were a new hire and they weren't eligible for benefits because it's the first of the month after 60 days or something. And then 2H is the enrollment. I believe those are the correct codes, but don't take that as gospel. Double check that on the IRS website. Again, you could change these if you disagree with this, or maybe you change one of the values over here. You'll want to change it over here as well, so it reflects correctly on the form. Perhaps the hire date was wrong. Rather than regenerating for everybody, you just come over here, type in a 1A. That might change how it reflects over here. So you'd want to change perhaps the 2D in this month to be 2H or something. All right, so you can change those codes here for all your employees. Of course, if you're not seeing somebody in here that you're expecting or vice versa, you'll want to look at their configuration. Perhaps, as I mentioned, the hire dates are wrong, or they didn't have benefits, or maybe they were a part-time employee, they didn't have any hours or something like that. That might explain why somebody is missing here. You can manually add somebody here or remove if you need to. That would remove them from the batch or add them into the batch. Or what I would recommend is fix the record in the system, and then you can regenerate to make sure that it's right. And so if you ever need to go back, you've got correct information in the system. And then if you are the self-insured, this is where that dependent information would show the dependent's enrollment. So this only applies for that self-insured. Remember, there's a checkbox here for the self-insured. And you would then see the employee ID. It would have the name of the dependent, their social or birthday or both, and then their enrollment for the various months of the year. So this may be blank on yours, just like it is on mine. All right, if you do make any changes, of course, you want to save. And if you intend to upload, that would be the best way to do it, because then you would come back into the system and you would browse to find that updated file. And then you would, let me just do this here. I don't think I changed anything, but I would go ahead and do this. I would hit import. Now you notice here, this import will overwrite the current year's values. So anything I changed in here is going to overwrite what's in the system here. The only way to see, I don't have any errors because everything I changed, I don't think I changed anything, but if I did, it was valid information. For an example, if I put a code in there that doesn't exist, or maybe instead of 2H, accidentally typed 3H, that would throw out an error. Or maybe I messed up their social, I made it too many numbers or something. That's going to throw out an error. But I didn't have any of those issues, so everything is okay. Now, if I, did this and then I realized I really made a big mistake, I could always delete and regenerate the entire batch using the settings in the system. That's also what you would do, is if you did go through and you fixed a bunch of addresses or something like that, and you didn't want to also do it in the import, you could delete and regenerate. So that's how that would work there. Now, once everything is done, you've reviewed everything on your spreadsheets and it's all looking good there, you can then use this download forms to download a PDF, or excuse me, a zip file of all the PDF forms. So that's what happens when you click this. It'll be a PDF download. You can then open that up using, again, it's going to be saved into your downloads area. You double click it to unzip it. Then you'll see a PDF for each employee. You'll also see a PDF for the employer copy. And of course, you can print these out if you like. You could manually email them if you want to. You could even manually upload them to employees' documents within the system. However, we do have this publish option. That allows you to publish it out to self-service and email directly from the system, so you don't have to do all that manual work. But that's what this download is for. I would show you the download, but it's just a zip file of PDF, so it's not really anything super interesting there. It does have the person's name as far as the file name, so you should be able to see, mine is in there, say Steve Tompkins as an example. All right, so let's talk about publishing. And that's something that you would need to do in the document setup here. So what you would do here, you'll see document delivery. Now, before I can get to publishing, I do need to possibly set up a folder for where those things are going to land. So it might be necessary for you to go to your documents here and create a folder if you've not done this in the past. If you've used these folders for other things like paychecks or W-2s, then you can do that. All right, so what you would do is if you don't already have a folder, I already have one here, as you can see, called ACA Forms. I created that by clicking on the drop down here and choosing Add Folder. All right, like the name is ACA Forms. It's pretty straightforward here. You give it a name of whatever you want to call it. All right, so that's how that works there. You can do that if you do create one. You'll see here, I can set up the groups that have access to this. I obviously wouldn't want to do that. Well, maybe it's not obvious. I wouldn't want to do that for the ACA forms because if I say that only a certain group has access to this and everybody's looking for the ACA forms on self-service, they would never be able to see it. So probably wouldn't be a great idea for ACA forms, maybe for other things, but not for ACA forms instead of groups, unless your group is like all employees, which is kind of meaningless. Blank also means all employees. All right, so once you have that there, let's go to the document delivery. And I do have an important note to talk about here when I'm in the document delivery and also in the downloads. I'll cover this first, and then we'll talk about it. So what I did is I've already set it up. If you haven't, when you click add, this all would be blank. All right, this is done by employer. Call it whatever you liked. I called it ACA. You can call it 1095s. It doesn't really matter what you call it. Make it descriptive is my recommendation there. Description, of course, if you want to put in a longer description than just the name, you're welcome to do that. Here is the report, or possibly report. Yeah, the report is going to use. So, of course, my ACA, I'm doing it for ACA. As you can see, I can set up for other things. W-2s, maybe payroll did that. 1099s, paychecks. So you might have several of these in here. It does need to be active to be used. So make sure that is checked. Personal email, what this means is you may be aware on the demographics, there are 2 email fields. The primary email and then the second email or personal email. This will go to the personal email by default. If that's blank, it goes back to the primary. So you might want to send that. Maybe they have a Gmail and they don't want it to go to their work. You can have it go right here. All right. Now, even though I select that, I would need to tell the system to actually send it by email. Otherwise, even though I have that selected, it's not going to go anywhere unless I have send by email here. You'll notice I do have post in ESS. So that's also an option there. If you're going to do both just like that, or you can do one or the other. If you are going to post in ESS, you need to tell which folder to go to. So you would select the folder that you're going to go to. I've already done that, so it has the ACA forms there. And then you would click save. Now, when we generate these PDFs, let me go back to the ACA. This right here is, like I mentioned, is going to be a PDF. Publishing them is also going to be a PDF. There is currently an issue with Adobe where the forms appear blank, but if you use other PDF readers, maybe Chrome as an example, it's a PDF reader. Many browsers have PDF readers in them. There are, of course, many companies who make PDF readers. They work just fine. I've opened these on my Mac with Preview, and they work just fine. They show all the data, but Adobe has an issue right now with their blank. It's not, I don't believe it's our issue. I think it's an issue with Adobe. If I'm wrong, Connor, let me know, but there's an issue with viewing them in Adobe. So if you download them and you open them or publish them and people say they're blank, have them try a different PDF reader.
I think it's
Right. So
Adobe and formatting. Sorry,
Yeah.
I think it's Adobe and like the 1095 PDF format itself plus Adobe is what the
Gotcha.
issue is. So yep.
Yeah. So when I hit publish, it's very much like download. It'll generate the forms and publish them out to self-service and or send them to the email, depending on that setting there. And so it kind of handles that for you. You may want to do a combination of these things, download them because possibly some people don't use ESS, or email, and you need to hand it out to them. This gives you that option to print it out if you need to. All right, now where does it go into self-service? Let's just look at that very quickly here. It would go into that folder that you created here under your your resources here under my documents. Now, this is something that in security, they would need to have access to do that. Let me talk about that just very quickly. Even though I created the folder and I didn't put any groups on there, I still need to make sure they have access to that in their security profile. So if they don't have access to my documents, in the security, they're not going to be able to get to it. So make sure that they do. You can restrict which folders they get access to and stuff like that. So if you want to limit them from seeing other things, you may have other folders like I have set up here. You can limit that. But if you want to publish these as self-service, you need to be able to do that. It's going to be under reports right here. So I go to My Documents, choose the reports. You will see the folder here. Here's my ACA, and I can view my thing. Like I mentioned, it did work in my browser, in my Chrome right here earlier. So yep, as you can see, it looks just fine here. So if people are using Chrome or another browser that has a built-in reader and is not using Adobe, it shows just fine. All right, and of course they can download this, they can print it, zoom in, and all those other things you might want to do on the form. All right, now I do want to mention one thing that sometimes confuses people when they're looking here in this documents folder. If they go into the ACA forms, they might see this right here, which is a massive file. And if they look at it here in self-service, every employee is showing. Rest assured that when the employees are looking, they're only seeing their own. So it's a little bit misleading because when you look here, as you notice by the size, and if I were to download this, this is everybody. Whereas the employee sees just their own, as you just saw. So don't worry if you come into here and you see a massive file that's got all the employees on it. On each individual employee, it is showing their individual one. If you're concerned with that, you can always go to an employee, go to their documents, and you can go into the reports and the folder and see that theirs is just their particular one. All right. So if you are concerned with that, you can always double check to make sure everything is right. And again, because I'm viewing it here in Chrome, it's just showing fine. All right, now we do have one final option. I'm not going to go through this, but if you would like, you can use Atrix to help you with your ACA filing. Some people prefer this because they handle things like mailing it out for you. If you are going to mail it out to many, many people, there's obviously some time and investment in the envelopes and paper and folding and all that stuff that goes into it. So you may want to go to Atrix to do that for you. They obviously charge a little bit, but it's not terrible, especially if you've already done your W-2s. They give you a discount. But under payroll reports, you'll see government reports. And one of the government reports here is your ACA, your 1095 B and C. Now you do need to generate the file. So you'd have to go to that generation, just like I did earlier, first before you can do this. But this will use Atrix for that. So perhaps your payroll folks are using Atrix for tax filing. It is a service that allows you to they do the filing and forms for you. So you can use that. If you click this, what it will do is ask you which year, and then you would hit accept, and it asks you to log into Atrix. If you have never used it before, if you go to atrix.com, that's AATRIX.com, you can create an account over there, and then that would be what you use to log in. Let me show you that. All right, so here you'll see enroll, and you can set this stuff up. So this is, it's not through us per se. You are working, directly with Atrix. They do charge a fee, as I mentioned, to do the printing and mailing and all those other things. So you just come up with whatever your username is and password and so forth. The accounting package, you just can put Criterion in there, and then your contact information, and then you'll need your company information. That's why I can't set this up right now. You'll need your EIN. All right, and then you can save your changes. Setting this up doesn't cost you a dime. You can set it up and have a login and everything. It's when you actually have them do the forms for you. You can look at them in the system, no cost and everything. But as soon as you tell it, hey, print my forms and mail them out, then they're going to ask for a credit card. So you can do that if you like. All right, I didn't see any questions or comments come through, so I believe we're all good in there. Of course, this video will be available for you to review. And let me just bring up my slideshow to talk about our upcoming schedule of events. All right, so in a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about overtime rules. So a payroll focused thing. Well, not necessarily payroll because it is on timesheets. You don't have to have payroll to do overtime rules, but your rules for setting up overtime and the configuration of that. We'll talk about the different tokens and so forth that go into overtime configuration. And then we're going to revisit a topic that we haven't talked about in a while, which is ESS widgets and calendars. So if you're interested in how that works and subscribing time off calendars and so forth, we will talk about that then. So you'll see that at the end of March here. And you'll notice employee management, and including mass hires and terminations. So we're just going to go over the hiring process, mass hires, mass terminations, leave of absence, and those types of things. So just kind of general HR admin usage of the system. Oops, I have the wrong dates on those last two. I do apologize. This will be 2 weeks after March, as you probably guess. I copied and pasted. So April 9th, and then this would be April 23rd, would be deductions. So setting up the deductions and how all that works. Of course, we'll send out our calendar with the correct dates. I apologize that they're incorrect on here. So I do want to thank you all for joining us today. If you have any questions regarding setup or how you process the things in the system here, please feel free to reach out to us, help@criterionhcm.com. Thank you again, and have a nice day.